What's up, YouTube? It's Hyperion again, and today I'm gonna do a little different thing. I'm just kind of gonna show you my process of figuring out redstone and contraptions and all that, and just so you understand, like, most of the time I build stuff in survival, but as you can see, we're in a creative world right now, and this is where I like to test crazy contraptions such as this that I can't build in my survival, but I think would work, so I just need to test them in theory. And this big contraption here we're not going to get into, but this is something I built for somebody else's world as they were setting up a bunch of traps and everything like that. So this is just a good example of like something I couldn't build in survival easily, but in creative mode, I'll just run a few tests. But today, the problem I ran into in my survival world was Nether Wart. And Nether Wart is obviously very important for potions and everything like that, and not too hard to grow. You just got to go to the Nether, get a little bit of soul sand, and a couple Nether Warts lying around somewhere, and from that you can keep growing them until you have millions. But I noticed in my world that I wasn't getting Nether Wart as fast as I wanted. I didn't have a lot lying around, and with the addition of stuff like red nether brick, I was going to want a lot more than what I already had. Not just for potions, but now it has so many other uses. So I said to myself, now I figured out ways to auto-mine farms and various ways to make my life easier. Why can't I figure one out for Nether Wart? And I just wanted to go over some of the tests and trials that I have gone through and what I finally landed on. And maybe it'll help you in your own trek to mine this stuff easier and faster. So let's begin. Now, this is my, well, kind of like a first attempt at mining Nether Wart, and I'm going to start off right now and tell you that this design completely failed. The principle was very similar to my automatic farm. Now, my automatic farm, you can see it right here. The way that works is that I realized that water breaks crops and stuff like that, and realized that it also works for Nether Wart. And so I originally tried, and the reason it's stair-stepped is that actually causes the water to flow further than it normally would just being released. And whereas in my farm I used pistons, for this, since it was much smaller, I decided it was better to stop wasting so many pistons and use water buckets and a dispenser to pour it out. And for the sake of this video, let's go ahead and give it a test and see how it works. Simple concept: button, circuit, running all the way to a redstone torch power line. Other than that, nothing too complicated there. We got a little ice on the bottom to help items slide into the hoppers a little bit better. And then we have a chest out here to collect it all. But you could also run these hoppers out to, say, my giant item sorter or something like that. Whatever you want to do. But for the sake of this video, it's just going to go to this chest. So let's push the button and see what happens. So as you can see, the droppers have started flowing water. And we'll go ahead and let that run for a second. Now, the downside to this is you got to hit the button again to turn it off. And that's the problem with droppers, and which is why I used pistons on my farm, because the pistons will just close themselves when the power is done cycling through. And then you just add a timer or something, and that will cause it to deactivate when you need it to. So as you'll notice here, there's some Nether Wart just floating in there. So we not all of it was collected, and there's a lot up here. So let's see how much. Let's get rid of these so we don't so we can get an accurate count. So if we go down here and collect all this, we got 4 there, 14, 18. So that's a pretty hefty loss right there. That's a lot to lose. And now not all of those were fully grown, as you noticed, but still even some of them were, and you'll miss that much. So how much did we catch? We caught at least 38. So with a loss of 18, I decided that wasn't really accurate, and I had to try to figure out why. Well, the reason why is because soul sand, which Nether Wart grows on, acts peculiar. It actually works more like carpet. It sees itself as more of a half block, and that you sink into the half block when you land on it. Well, this also applies to items. Items sink in it and get stuck in it is basically what ends up happening. You can't really see or tell, but I'm actually stepping halfway into the soul sand, which is why it makes it so slow to walk. So when the water is flowing over, the items are actually getting stuck in the soul sand and not moving like they would on, say, dirt or any other surface, to be honest. So that was causing a problem. So this idea was scrapped, and I decided to do a little bit more research, and that's when I came up with this idea, which is kind of my favorite idea. Let's go ahead and get rid of these again, and 38 in that one. Here we have 0. So how this works is we got a little soul stand in there, and it's a lot smaller, as you can see too, because you don't have to stair step, and you can kind of make this any size you want. The way I decided to do it was I realized that maybe I just needed to be hopper rich with it, and make sure there's a hopper everywhere. So what happens here when we press this button, 2 pistons open up the thing and it just drops them straight into hoppers. And this idea seemed to work the best. As you can see, we're already ticking up here, and we're just going to get a quick look while that's counting down of how this works. All it is just a bunch of repeaters running in a line to a bunch of pistons that powered up. And then over here we've got a redstone torch keeping the pistons closed, and then our button is going to activate or deactivate that redstone torch. And very simple mechanics, simple wiring. You can probably do some cooler things with it to make it not as visible with the redstone like it is here, but this was just thrown together as a test. In my survival world, I did a much better design because most of the redstone was underground, and I don't need a chest here because the hopper runs right into my sorter. I can show you an example of that right here. This design worked pretty well. Haven't really found too many flaws with it. Sometimes it's kind of hard to run redstone with pistons because pistons will take up, I mean, you're going to use at least 3 spaces for pistons. You got the piston itself, the pusher arm, and the block. So with pistons, you run into the problem of A, it takes up more space, and B, pistons are not the cheapest thing to make. I mean, they require 1 iron each. Not too bad. I mean, the 2 buckets in there required 5 iron each, so it's not that it's not necessarily more expensive than that design. But let's check it out. We got 64 out of that batch, so much higher than the 38 over there. And I'm not even sure if there's the same amount of soul sand, but you know, getting 64 Nether Wart with just 1 push of a button is way more convenient than running up and down lines of soul sand. You still have to plant it yourself. Unfortunately, there's not a way to like auto plant stuff, but this system really just kind of worked. And every now and then you'll get a little bit of a glitch of some Nether Wart landing like up here or something. Just go collect it, but you're not gonna. The losses will be marginal compared to that design over there. Now that is unfortunately the hard part about it, is that the hoppers are the most expensive part of this build, because you as you can see, you kind of need you need a lot of them running down. It doesn't really matter what order you put the hoppers in. You can just see, I told you, sometimes it just bounces up here. But gee, a loss of 2, that's way better than 18. Anyways, now you can see that now that it's rebuilt again, you know, it's a pretty simple system. It is spacey, it is big, but like I said, this is just this build. You can kind of just do your own thing, but the real secret here is pistons. But while I was building this, I noticed something else, and that is, if I was to take, let me check the chest here. Let's take this out so we can see. If you were to throw an item onto soul sand, it disappears. And it appeared in here. And I did that by accident and realized, oh, right, soul sand works like carpet. Even though it's a full block, it's actually technically only a small block, because you actually stand in the block when you jump into it. It actually still collects items underneath with hoppers. And that's when I realized I don't actually need the pistons. I can actually build a system like this. And this is very different. No pistons, much simpler redstone, so able to be a little smaller. Again, this is bigger than it needs to be because it's all above ground. But you could totally make this underground, and most of the principles are going to stay the same. But the only way this one works differently, and it's kind of a hybrid of those two designs, is when you push this button, it activates all these dispensers with water. And again, we still run into that problem, but now that it broke the items, you notice none of them are in the water, and that's because they all fell onto the soul sand, which is covering a whole row of hoppers again. And so all of our items should be now in here. And so as we see it's counting up, we'll see a little bit of difference. Now, granted, again, I don't think I used the same amount of soul sand blocks as the other two builds, but already we've got pretty close to 64, and I picked up a couple out here. So I mean, that's a pretty solid system right there, and it's much more compact, much simpler to use. It isn't necessarily cheaper, as in it doesn't necessarily not use as many resources. There's a lot less redstone involved, but you are going to have a bucket for each dropper, and depending on how big you make this thing, that could lead to some issues because that might mean that the water will only spread so far, so you're going to keep adding droppers, and therefore you could end up making a lot of buckets for it. So we're in creative here, so we have an infinite supply, but if you're trying to build this in your survival world, that could be quite expensive, with buckets running about I think 5 iron a piece. So yeah, you might not want to go that route if you want to save on stuff. And plus, pistons are cool, and it works. So that's another thing. Also, you know, the droppers aren't necessarily the prettiest things. You know, you could also use pistons to power this similar system by making the pistons block off a source block of water, and then when they go down, the water flows out and then does the same thing. But this is a really simple method, and all you need is basically just redstone running to all of the droppers to power them up, as you can see here. And then the button just does that. The other flaw with this versus, again, the piston system is, once again, you got to actually deactivate it manually. You can't just walk away from it. You got to make sure you can turn it off. But, you know, at least you got your Nether Wart, and you just plant it again. From there, you know, you just get ready for the next batch, and when it's ready, you just hit the button again and collect it all at the base. So that's another system, and the nice thing about this is you could also build this in a lot of different shapes, such as this one. So as you can see, we have a completely different configuration here, and this is where the water trick excels the most. Now, I just threw this together real quick because I realized I didn't preemptively make it for the video, but you know, I threw it together real quick, so it wasn't too hard, especially in creative mode. And what we got here is we got a 7x7 block soul sand patch with four droppers, or dispensers, sorry, with water buckets inside at each corner. And very, very simple redstone on this one, because it's just a redstone circuit just running in a circle all the way around. You can see here how it goes. It's just a simple circuit all the way around, going across and completing itself, activating all of the dispensers. So now that the dispensers are hooked up to this wire, we've got the soul sand underneath with you know, 7x7, and we had to put hoppers under each block of soul sand. And this is where you will run into the difficulties with a build like this, because hoppers are pretty iron heavy, very expensive. But I mean, if you have the resources, this is one way to do it. Right here, you're probably going to get a lot more than you would out of these, though you could cycle through these a lot quicker and fit that in a tighter space. But this system right here, you know, God only knows how much we're going to get, because I'm not going to sit here and wait for the Nether Wart to all grow, because it'll take forever. But let's go ahead and hit the button and see what happens. So it activated up, and then I built this timer system in to quickly just send it through one more time and deactivate everything. So there you go. This little timer here will just go ahead and it will start everything up. And then you'll see it work slowly. We've got a 1-tick pulse. bud switch there, and then when the timer runs out, closes it up, and the circuit is broken. So there you go. That's one way to do it right there. Let's just go ahead and grab this and throw it in there with the rest of it. So we had a loss of 2 still, and you could avoid that by making higher walls around it and everything. I just like to make the one rimmed wall, one block wall, because it's easy to get into, and when you're planting and everything, because you do still have to plant everything manually. But that is one way to make a really easy Nether Wart farm. So there you go. Now you have, let's see how much we got, and it wasn't even fully grown, but we only got 52, but, I mean, if it was fully grown, I'm sure we would have gotten buku Nether Wart from a build like this. But it's up to you what you want to design, what you want to build. The real secret here is the principle of water and pistons for harvesting Nether Wart. Now that you know that, you can go out there and try a whole bunch of different things that I might not even have thought of. So cool. Feel free to share in the comments below and all that. And yeah, if you have any questions, also comment. I'll try to answer. This stuff is sometimes hard to explain, but anyways, hope that was useful. Hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.